What's up, guys? Welcome to an all-new episode of Convos on the Pedicab. Today I'm joined by a very special guest, cybersecurity expert Kai Stransky. Before we get started, just got to give a quick shout-out to our sponsor, 10th Planet Austin, at 10PATX on both Twitter and Instagram. Get woke and improve your jiu-jitsu at the same time. There's a lot of civil unrest going on. Our police got defunded. There's really no better time than now to learn how to intelligently defend yourself, both on the mats and on the streets. Our jiu-jitsu program is taught by the number 5th-ranked grappler in the world, Kyle Baim. Our striking and MMA, number 6th-ranked jiu-jitsu practitioner in the world, Gabe Tuttle. Our MMA and kickboxing programs are taught by former UFC fighter Andrew Craig, Jiu-Jitsu black belt and pro fighter Cody Hofstadter, and pro Muay Thai fighter Chantal Perry. We also have a phenomenal conditioning program taught by Isik the Viking Ninja. So if you're in Southeast Austin, or if you're in the Austin area in general, please come by. We are located between 71 and I-35. 10th Planet Austin at 10PATX on both Twitter and Instagram. Anyway, Kai, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, it's great being here. Thank you. It's a good time to fucking talk about cybersecurity.
No kidding.
Especially with the Capitol being breached like that, the way it happened, everybody's like, think of all the physical stuff damage, but on top of the physical damage, the digital assets that were there that were taken. I saw reports that a laptop was stolen, hard drives taken, computers were left unlocked, access to emails. The good news is I was reading also that a lot of the USBs and also like to install any kind of software, it required kind of a physical card. Back to the USBs though, part of the reason since Snowden decided to take assets off computers, they decided to now shut down USB ports. And so to make it a little harder for you to pull data off of a computer. That's a good move in the right direction for cybersecurity.
Yeah, I think that's the big concern that I was worried about because, when you call these guys like violent extremists and terrorists and you say that this is like an insurgency, like they're definitely overblowing it. And when you look at like the damage caused by the protests during the summer, and you look at the violence and the
small
stuff that
burned down.
and you look at all that stuff that occurred, the damage and the actual violence was way greater. But the issue is, there wasn't like compromising national security threats being issued by people coming into the Capitol and taking somebody's USB or taking somebody's computer and accessing extremely important emails. And you never know who's going to have access to that. It could be a hostile foreign agent or somebody that wants to really destroy the United States, and they can get your banking info. They can get like a whole bunch of stuff that's really dangerous.
Correct. I mean, especially with the amount of chaos that was happening, would be a perfect opportunity for a foreign country operative to take advantage of that and to bypass even some of those security controls. There is definitely that potential. Leaving a computer completely unlocked and access to emails doesn't mean that somebody couldn't have gone and forwarded all those emails off to some random email address.
Dude, but that's the big red flag that the media isn't really talking about. Because if they just were honest about that, people would understand the severity of what happened.
Correct. Random trinkets and pens and, letter headers and stuff like that are very minuscule to the amount of digital inventory that you could basically take with, leaving an office and leaving your computer unlocked.
Yeah. And I get how a lot of these people, like why these people were here, and I understand what they were going through, and there is a lot of questions that we're going to go into about the integrity of our elections. But Donald Trump kind of is to blame for this, because you had to have known that something was going to go down just based on what you heard from people on Twitter. And when you have like 1 million people coming to an area under this pivotal of a circumstance, you have to plan for bad behavior. And the fact that you didn't do that, you put the country's security at risk, not because of the violence that was going to happen to like the senators or the congressmen or any of that stuff, but because of the digital assets that were just left completely
Vulnerable.
alone. Yeah.
Vulnerable. Yeah, I think that is definitely the sad piece of it is, from reading and looking at the stuff, it's like most of the stuff that came out that they knew several days ahead that there was this rally going to happen. They knew that there was going to be a potential chance of having this massive amount of people. There was multiple asks from different even government agencies saying, hey, do you need any help? But one thing that I found interesting, though, that obviously there's going to be more coming out in the investigation, but they're showing that, there was even within the Capitol Police, potentially a lot of them assisted in helping potentially the people to breach the facilities. Not obviously all of them, but there is that potential of internal compromise. I mean, in cybersecurity, that's a big thing.
Yeah.
Is having that basically being breached from the inside by your own people.
I think that there's two sides to this, right? So there's side A could be the fact that a lot of the Capitol Police believe are on the side of the protesters, right?
Correct.
And side B, it's a giant psyop to go after conservatives and dissenting points of view, and you're just facilitating a psyop by letting people come into the Capitol and do this.
Correct. I mean, it's really kind of crazy the fact that there's been. I mean, the misinformation has been started back in the first election when Trump ran the first time. But it's just the fact that it's continued so heavily that it is difficult to find those nuggets of truth in all of this chaos has created, I think, also that. That pain for people, that violence, that rage, because people don't understand. I would say people that maybe didn't take the time to educate themselves created that confusion if you're only relying on one source of information. I mean, at this point in time, to try to get the truth out of anything, you can't just watch one mainstream media. You're having to gather all this different stuff. So with that, basically just kind of like chaos of information being thrown at these people, all the pandemic, they've been locked up, they've had to be forced in their houses multiple times. They could even have their small businesses going under,
All of that stuff is a breeding grounds for
Correct.
Extremism.
Correct.
And when stuff like that happens and you've been seriously affected by this, people want answers, and you'll look for anything for an answer.
Correct. I mean, yeah, at that point, I mean, yeah, you could be completely blinded just for the fact that you're just so enraged of all this stuff that's going on, and you see, oh, look, hey, this is going to get me a step closer to my freedom, to my money, to my businesses being unlocked. I think that's the other thing that's coming out of this stuff is I think some of those people, yes, they maybe have been there to support Trump, but I think some of those people that are storming the Capitol are mad at the government just for the fact that they're leaving businesses to burn.
I think that the
physically
majority,
and metaphorically.
So I think that the majority of the people that were there, I mean, I wasn't there, right? So I could be wrong, but I really feel as though the majority of the people that were at the Capitol were there for that reason. And I think that a lot of people got radicalized to support Trump as a result of the pandemic.
Yeah,
because
I would agree.
of all of these lockdowns.
Correct. But then you could turn. I mean, at the same time, in I wouldn't say in defense, but basically the counterpoint is: did Trump do that to himself? Did he handle things in a well enough manner during the lockdown, or was there other political pressures or other even politicians, as an example, that didn't to be blamed for this boiling point?
What grade would you give Trump for handling this?
I mean, with him knowing the fact that he could have known ahead of time, fairly poor. But at the same time, I don't.
From A to F, what grade would you give?
Okay, probably a C.
I'd say C minus. Yeah, C minus.
I think that he did make some good decisions, but I think at a certain point that he should have taken a lot more precautions. Or maybe he didn't realize that things were going to blow up as big as it. I have that feeling partially, maybe he wanted to riot, he wanted to stand. Let's say even to inflate his ego, but I don't think he intended for it to get as crazy as it did.
Well, but you also had so many reports coming out of China as a result of this. And granted, the WHO didn't really help matters very much.
No, it did not.
But you also have ambassadors and people going over there on a constant basis. We have people that go to China on a regular basis within our State Department, right? And within our intelligence communities that will have an understanding of what is happening. And even when there is a virus that nobody knows about, this is a novel virus, right? And people within the State Department, we're at Event 201. And you've heard of Event 201, right?
No, I haven't.
It was they simulated a global pandemic at Johns Hopkins, and it was funded by the WHO and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, right?
Okay, yes.
You had people within the U.S. State Department that were at Event 201, okay? you being the president of the United States need to prepare for the event of a pandemic happening.
Correct. You should pay for worst case scenarios.
Yes, and he didn't do that. And we should have been stocking up and buying PPE en masse in January.
Yeah,
which we didn't do. He fired his pandemic response team, which he shouldn't have done. And so, when this virus hit, we didn't have like the hospital staffing or the PPE or anything available to actually let people operate freely but cautiously.
Correct. And I think that's the other thing that's super interesting about how China handled the pandemic and how we handled pandemic, which I find kind of interesting. The fact that they were able to spin up hospitals so quickly and just build them out of nowhere. Either they were already prepared for something like this to happen, or they knew about it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, the third way, it's just, or maybe they had that many people. It's just interesting that the fact that how many hospitals did we spin up? I haven't heard of.
We haven't, but then, and so this is where Trump really shat the bed, right? But where Trump did well on was the fact that they started rushing the vaccines.
The vaccine, correct.
Came out pretty quickly, and he didn't issue a national shutdown, and our civil liberties were not infringed upon too much as a result of these lockdowns, whereas in other countries, especially specifically China, people were getting their doors bolted shut. In Australia, drones flying around, arresting people,
Correct.
Giving people massive fines because they weren't following the rules. If you had if a president had an opportunity to really be a fascist, that was the golden opportunity to be a fascist in the face of a global pandemic, and Trump didn't do that. So that kind of eased a lot of my concerns of him being an actual fascist. But there was a big reason why I think that this pandemic spread the way it did and has affected us for so long is because he was just not competent at preparing for it. But I'd rather have an incompetent than a fascist running the country. You know what I mean? Like that.
I agree, but I think the other reason is because America is America, and we like to do whatever the fuck we want.
Yeah,
I think that plays into that compared to other countries. I mean, because if you look at cultural things, we're proud of being individuals.
Yeah, America will never do pandemics well.
Yes.
The United States will never do pandemics well, and that's just something people got to understand. But that being said, if they just told us and communicated what was happening with this virus and just said, hey, man, these are some of the precautions that you guys are going to have to start taking for the next few months.
I think there would be less extremists.
People would have become less extreme as a result of it. You would see a lot more mask wearing. You would have seen bars preemptively set themselves up as restaurants so they wouldn't become super spreaders.
Yep.
A lot of the civil unrest that occurred with the BLM would have not been as bad because a lot of this stuff does occur because people are locked in their house on social media constantly.
Well, and I think that's because the problem is because it turned into being political. If that communication would have came out, just like you said, if that stuff would have came out and the political stuff, okay, whatever. But it's the fact that what hit the media wasn't how you can basically prepare yourself, how you can, get these bars open and have restaurants or, communicating all this mass. All it felt was like some kind of political agenda. And so that's why people have started to shut it down. It's like, these people are telling me what to do so they can gain. It felt like,
that's exactly what it felt like based on how the media was communicating.
Yes.
And honestly, they probably did have something to gain from it. Like Amazon was crushing it.
Yeah.
Apple, all these tech companies did. Well, at least their share prices went up.
And then Zoom. I mean, you can't forget Zoom with China. Zoom, I mean, they're loving. They're loving
Zoom is loving it. But at the same time, Zoom is a new company, right? And it just happened to be right place, right time. That could also just be a right place, right time type of thing too, or not? Maybe
yeah. I mean, I guess that's true. I mean, but you have Cisco WebEx, you have MS Teams. You have Google Hangouts. You have plenty of other infrastructure that was already existing. So it's interesting that that's what the consumer though got drove into. I don't know how or what marketing campaign or whatever they did, but somehow you talk to probably anybody in the street. They know what Zoom
has a very obvious connection to China. The CEO of Zoom is very much involved. He doesn't even hide that he's involved with the CCP. So there is a little bit of when I ran for city council this year, I had to use Zoom for forms, but I immediately deleted that shit right afterwards because I do not want to use that platform.
I mean, but at this point, is Facebook any better?
I got rid of my Facebook. I don't use.
Well, but you're still using Instagram, correct?
And they're owned by Facebook, and it's just one of those things. But I'm okay with Instagram because I don't spend as much time on it.
Okay, I'll give the fair tip. But their new term of service basically said if you're using our app, you're guaranteed to give every access to your phone completely. I mean, mic, photos, everything. I mean, so, and on top of it, Instagram's owned by Facebook. Like, I'm not bashing anybody because I have a Facebook and an Instagram account on both sides. But I want people to realize that when you're giving access to your phone, to your computer for Instagram and Facebook, you're the product. You're hands down the product.
I understand. But I think it also depends on how you, like, if you understand what's happening, you're less likely to get manipulated by this stuff.
That's correct. I think that's the other thing that is also very true is the fact that people need to realize that how important data is, though, because that is, in a way, it's still its own currency. And I think that's what I would want the general public to realize, and especially in all of this, that you know that you could potentially be manipulated by what Facebook puts in front of you, what Instagram puts in, that even the fact check things.
Well, that's kind of why Trump could have lost the election, because big tech literally went on a fucking massive campaign to manipulate people into voting for Biden.
Well, correct, and that's what we talked about a little bit earlier before we were here is just the fact that it's not about the time slots anymore that you got in media. It was like, what TV stations do you own? Like, I mean, in the past, you look at political stuff and they'd run political ads and you'd have your time slots and everything like that. But now it was like flat out like they were just shutting that person down. Like it wasn't like it didn't matter. Like they were intentionally rising up.
Well, so the
sides.
tech companies back in like April and May, the tech companies would block reopening. Like when people were doing reopening events, they would hide. They wouldn't let people promote the reopening events. But when the BLM stuff started occurring, it was like the top of the algorithm list. The BLM stuff was literally that became at the top of the list and became like all those protests became super advertised, and they a lot of people came because a lot of people are definitely pissed off about racial injustice, right? Let's call it what it is. What happened to George Floyd, what happened to Breonna Taylor, what happened to all these people is horrible, and it's got to be addressed. There is a point where people are going to say enough is enough, but big tech definitely facilitated that point by aggressively promoting these events and getting as many people to show up for a mass gathering in the middle of a pandemic at once.
Correct, and I find this interesting too, especially because of the fact that they slapped like the CDC or warning about all the other different posts, but they're picking choosing on where they're slapping that. But the other thing too, in the difference between speaking even to like Parler, which is another social media that just got taken down recently.
Yeah, that's overreach.
But here's what's interesting about that, though. They're proud of themselves because they don't use an algorithm to scrape and go through their data like Facebook and Instagram. So part of the things that get slapped with those CDC like labels or things that get filtered or get put in different places, it's a lot of it is automated in that. Like it may have been somebody like inputted that information to have that algorithm run that certain way, but then once they let it go, it's going, it's running. There's so much data and there's so much information. There isn't a human that's manually promoting that.
And I also think that these events at the Capitol were kind of being used as an excuse by the tech companies to just take out competition. Because Parler was going to be a legit source of competition to Twitter. And a lot of these Parler users probably supported the Capitol riots. A whole bunch of them were there, all that stuff. We admit that. But if you really look closely, there was probably a lot more talking about going to the Capitol on Twitter, Facebook, and the mainstream platforms than there ever was on Parler. So it just seems as though you're using an event to create an excuse to undercut your competition, and it's like one of the most monopolistic things that you could be doing. And even if you're on the progressive left, you got to raise your eyebrows at this. It's very dangerous territory what some of these companies are doing.
Yeah, correct. I think it's the one thing I was listening actually to the policy officer talk for Parler, and she was like, "Hey, we just because the left side was so happy about our privacy stance and how we handle it, we're trying to be nonpartisan. We're trying to be a neutral platform where you can have an open voice, open platform, just like if you were talking in a town square. Yes, it happened to be promoted in the mainstream media that it was
super
a left,
right-wing.
Yes, but that wasn't their intention.
But with the way things are right now, just by saying that, you're just going to get a lot of right-wing people just coming to your events now. But it's weird. Like when I was running for city council, one of the things I wanted to talk about was teaching financial literacy, like having financial literacy programs in like black neighborhoods to teach to get like more black and Hispanic people to like participate and benefit from the stock market and like actually like take advantage of Trump's presidency.
Yeah.
And I had a bunch of like super Trumpy MAGA type people that like loved my campaign, and I said I don't think I said anything divisive at all. I talked about like the police were having to learn Brazilian jiu-jitsu and be EMT certified. Like I had like legitimate plans to like try to make things better for everybody. And the people that liked my campaign the most were just super hardcore conservatives. So I kind of it's
interesting.
But it's weird though how that works, because an app like Parler could have just been used as an alternative platform,
and that's what the goal. That's
yeah.
what they started it.
And then just a bunch of conservatives feel that they're being persecuted by big tech, that they just all flock to it, and then it just becomes a right-wing echo chamber.
Correct, exactly, and that's why I feel so bad for Parler. Like, that wasn't their intention. They turn around and Amazon shutting them down, Apple shutting them down, Google shutting them down, and so of course the big tech brothers, they're like, hey, we don't, we're shutting you down, and so then nobody else really wants to do business because they're scared. They're scared because guess what? Oh, you're doing business with Parler, we're shutting you down too, and that's ridiculous. These are publicly traded companies that should not be censoring and shutting down other tech
hopefully
companies.
This goes to the Supreme Court, and hopefully the judges that Trump picked will do the right thing. But I'm having doubts. The more this is happening, the more I'm having doubts that these people are actually going to do the right thing.
Well, this is also the fact that the other scary piece is like, to even take Parler out of this equation. Let's just take a brand new social media company that's up and trying to start to compete against Twitter and Facebook. This is super intimidating. This isn't good news.
No.
This is like, why would you want to start up again? Like,
this is something that the Rockefellers. This is like way worse. Like, this is worse than. This is like what the Rockefellers did in the 1920s on steroids. This is like the Bill Gates antitrust lawsuits with Microsoft, like times 100. This is very serious.
Well, I mean, shoot, don't even get me started about Microsoft and their Death Star. I mean, literally, there's in the media, there's articles about when the Russia, when Russia was part of the FireEye and SolarWinds breach, how basically Microsoft came in, and once they located that file, they just eradicated that file across everybody's computer. I mean, that's pretty scary. The fact that they're like, oh, we're just gonna just remove this across anybody's computer that would be potentially affected, and like. Yeah, because they own it. It's kind of the same thing with, like, you plug it into Facebook. If you have a Microsoft operating system, they have access into your home. Like that, I don't think people realize the scale of tech that you are letting into your lives and control. I mean, back to the whole thing, which I don't agree with, but the fact is that for you to get away from all these companies, to get away from all this censorship and everything else, you're talking about having to then turn around and potentially build your own infrastructure. That means fiber optic cables, building your own, having your own, so internet service provider, your own phone provider, maybe the operating system, all just to get away from all these people that have access into your life and insight into who you are as a person. So then they know how to market and help you. Well, hopefully help you. I mean, who knows? But, get you closer to, that soda that you really like, because they were able to track you, and then they notice you have a junk food addiction.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that part is pretty frightening, that I think that people just don't realize that this is so inundated in our lives at this point that they can really sway your thoughts and your minds well before you even realize it potentially. Like, if you're not keeping tabs of, like, hey, what is this stuff that keeps being in front of me? If you're not paying attention to what you're scrolling to, or even what the algorithms that is putting in front of your children as they're going on YouTube Kids, I know you can find plenty of stuff about the crazy stuff that's happened around that, from China and Russia themselves and their crazy cartoons. It's a real scary thing that I don't think people really realize, because they're just trying to live their day-to-day life, when your whole life could technically start being controlled if you're not paying attention to what you're putting.
And you don't realize it, and it's both the people on the far left and the far right. Like,
it could be from either side.
Yeah. Because you see a lot of these, like, a lot of the Antifa people are, like, most of them are, like, really good people. Most of them are super well-intentioned. Most of them want the same things that both of us want, right? But at the same time, it's like, a lot of these times you ask these people, like, hey, why are you protesting? What's the solution? What are we going to do? Nobody has an answer. Or nobody has, like, a clear-cut, direct, actionable answer. Very few of these people do.
That because action is hard work.
And then when you talk, like, all the QAnon people, it's the exact same thing.
America needs to take action in the right way, though. Not with violence, but with creating areas, all the way from the ground up, creating places where privacy is important.
And it's also being locally involved. Like,
that's
you have like these super invasive governments. You have these big tech and Wall Street and China, and all of these entities are getting more and more immersed in your day-to-day life, and the level of control that they're exerting, it's getting to a point where it's very scary.
So work in your circle of influence.
Right. So you have to work in your circle of influence, and you have to, like, go to your state legislative office. You have to be involved with your city council. You have to do things locally so that okay, well, if Amazon is going to do what they did to Parler, you have to pressure your governors and your state reps to divest from Amazon.
And that's a big scary thing. I mean, who doesn't love having their stuff right to their door? Prime is amazing. Like
Yeah.
that's the other thing that's
But that's what the movement has to be. And a state rep wrote to the governor of Florida about doing that. And I think that we need to start, like, people need to go to the Texas legislative session has just started, and I'm going to start, like, going to the Capitol and trying to talk to reps about that. Even if it, like, falls on deaf ears, at least try, right? Because the only way that you can fight stuff like this is if your government officials take a stand.
correct. I mean, it's
Not going to happen from yelling. It's not going to happen from talking shit on the internet, and it most certainly won't happen from lashing out violently against a government official.
correct. Yeah, I mean, at this point, I mean, the infrastructure's here. They have the forces. You're not going to be able to beat the military. Like that, it's you're going to have to go about it in a tactful way of communicating and working up the chain and getting the right people in office from, like you said, even the local level. You get the right person involved. Then that you get a mayor that you actually can trust and like.
Unlike the guy we have,
that doesn't shut down small businesses and helps them grow.
Or at the end of the day, if you have a virus that's this bad and you shut them down, there needs to be contingency plans to help pay these businesses, and you shouldn't be doing a 25% tax increase in the form of a rail while a pandemic's going around. Like, and you also shouldn't be flying on a private jet to Cabo when you're in a pandemic, and this is literally how you exacerbate climate change, which will create future pandemics going forward. So it's just, we need better public officials.
Well, but problem solvers. People that actually take action and trying to actually get solutions.
Problem solvers, not problem creators.
Correct.
And that's what a lot of our city council is kind of leaning more towards problem creation than problem solving.
Well, and it's also having to be the open picture of the fact that you need to be able to think about both sides of the coin. As much as you may want this one decision, even financial literacy for Hispanics and blacks, that may be awesome. But look at what is that going to cost? Is that going to pull? Are you going to be able to raise funds from somewhere else? Is that going to take funds from somewhere else? You need to actually be able to look at that whole global.
You have to look at the whole picture, but you could also just use town halls. Like my whole thing was like until we figure out how to fund that, you just utilize your town halls to just teach free financial literacy programs and try to like work with like bankers and financial analysts and experts and entrepreneurs to go into these neighborhoods and teach people this stuff that they want to be taught.
Oh yeah, I mean honestly, it would take then reaching out to them and see, hey, would you be willing to volunteer some of your time?
Yeah, see, I mean, and a lot of people do want to give back. There are enough people that would voluntarily want to do this. And when it comes to making sure jiu-jitsu training is mandatory, there are enough black belts in Austin that will volunteer their time to do this. Like, I don't think it's going to cost that much money to do a lot of this stuff.
It's just people taking action.
Yeah, it's people taking action. When we defunded our police department, it would have gotten a lot less backlash if that money was just given to small businesses that couldn't operate. If they just said, "Hey, man, I know you guys can't operate because of the pandemic and because of like health and safety, so we're gonna help you guys and keep you guys afloat with the money that we took away from APD," you'd have seen way less backlash from that.
Correct. I mean, look at all the concert halls that are closing down, all the community places. I mean, the fact that you guys had amazing places that people came to listen to music, but then also kind of take off in their careers, music, and comedy wise. And now
a lot of stuff is going under. But a lot of these businesses were struggling mightily before that, and the pandemic was like a death blow. There was a lot of that, and
but why were they struggling before?
Probably taxes, probably like
when growth of Austin.
Yeah, I think that when you're a small business owner or you own like a bar in Austin, and the business and the city starts growing exponentially, you have more bars that you have to compete with.
Yeah,
and I think that growth can actually hurt certain businesses.
Yeah, I can see that.
For me, giving pedicab rides, I benefit from it because I just go from A to B and I don't really have any ties to anything.
Correct. Yeah. Well, and you're picking up all the patrons either way, no matter what bar they came out of.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. I mean, the only difference is though when classic landmarks close and a C3 foreign mega corporation takes its place, it's like the quality of people that you get are going to be a lot worse, and it ruins the spirit of what makes this place amazing, and that's a big deal.
Correct. Having the big corporations don't really bring what is, I guess, the culture of Austin. Yeah. You start losing.
Well, they have no face. You don't want like some faceless mega corporation being the face of our music in Austin, and like that could be where we're headed if we don't fix this. But the city did approve like a lot of grants for these, I think what is 100. I think like a bunch of these businesses are eligible for like over $100,000 in grants or something like that, right?
Oh, that's awesome though.
Yeah, but they don't start like they can't like do the application till like February, or they don't get it till like February or something like that. Like there's some like hoops and bullshit they have to jump through in order to even get this. They got to take like equity and diversity training and do all this stuff to like.
Oh wow.
I mean, which is it's hey, look, I think everybody should be more sensitive to people, right? But at the same time, it's like the city shut your business down. They shouldn't make you take a class to get your money. Like they shut your business down.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they kind of put you in this hard situation where, you know, even if you were doing, I mean, at the same time, it can be challenging. I mean, because there's people who have already been abusing the funds that have been coming out. I mean, that's also, you know, the other kind of scary part is, you know, there's multiple people that were taking out, I think even like loans around stuff, and then they weren't even using that money to help their employees. Yeah,
there's a lot of and there's got to be some written documentation that like, hey man, you have to pay this back if you can't prove that you paid your employees.
Yeah.
Like there has to be that. And there's also a lot of businesses are making their employees work while they're still getting unemployment, and the hours are so bad and the money is like not nearly as good that they're just like literally losing money to have to go to work. And that's kind of fucked up. That's really fucked up too. And then there's other companies that aren't refusing to take cash, that only take card. And if you're like and that could really screw up a lot of the financial situation of a lot of the workers if you really think about it. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that these people do. But at the end of the day, we have social media, and you could use the power of social media to point out asshole companies so people don't go to them.
Yeah, but now you have turn around, and you have Twitter and you have Facebook, and they're censoring things, and they're deciding now what comes up, because maybe that's false information. That, you know, if you turn around and you start bashing Twitter, and let's even if it is an actual fact, I mean, they're going to be like, are they now going to censor it? It's a privately owned company.
Rid of Donald Trump's Twitter account.
Well, I guess it's public now,
the Ayatollah is on Twitter. You know what I mean? Like, or you have fact checkers fact checking things about COVID, but when are you going to fact check the president of China? You know, like, it's just.
Yeah, you fact check the president. So are you going to start fact checking every president now from now on?
Yeah. Are you going to fact check Xi Jinping? You know, like fact check the Ayatollah. Like, are you going to remove like some of these like foreign leaders? They like will really incite violence on their social media, and nothing happens, right? So it's like. Are you doing this deliberately, Jack, or are you just like, or is it just so insignificant because you don't relate to it since it's way on the other side of the world? But this is a global platform, so you got to be better about that. Because otherwise, if you're a hypocrite, you know this hypocrisy, all it does is create more Trumpism.
Well, I don't even know if I would like. I mean, that's not untrue, but I think that's the fact that it just could create more division in general.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But Trumpism will thrive under division. Like that type of thinking thrives under division.
Great, but okay, what would you define Trumpism though? I'm actually curious. Like, what for you makes Trumpism?
I don't know. I mean, I think I'm just kind of loosely using that word because it's just to me, it's a sign of like people gravitating towards like one ideology and not letting go of an ideology and being very set in like a certain viewpoint.
Okay.
Does that make, you know what I mean?
So it's almost not even the fact of whether like you believe in Trump or not. It's just the fact that you're almost stuck in one way. Kind of. I mean, almost in my opinion, letting your ego rule too much of your.
Yes, you're letting your ego rule too much of like your day-to-day life.
Yes.
You know, or you you just basically will. I think my the best take about Trumpism is that you're looking for one person to be the answer to your problems. Because that's what it is. Like a lot of people I know who are like hardcore into Trump really think that Trump is the Messiah. Like they feel like Trump is the guy who's handling everything. Like they like Trump is the guy that's fighting the deep state. He's fighting the globalists. He's fighting the New World Order. He's the guy that like we're putting our entire breadbasket into. And I think Trumpism is the reliance on one individual to do things that take a collective effort.
Correct. And it goes back to kind of what we talked earlier. Are they actually taking action themselves? Like, that's nice that you believe in that individual. That's nice that you have stuff and you think he's doing to that. But what are you doing even on a local scale, on a small scale? What are you doing to help promote that? Like, showing up and rioting and storming the Capitol is not the right way to get through what you want done.
No, or yelling arrest Bill Gates at the fucking state Capitol buildings. You know, doesn't do anything.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Or posting QAnon riddles on Instagram is not the right thing to do.
Correct.
Even Alex Jones is criticizing QAnon.
I think at this point now, because of the expansion of how fast you can connect to people across the world, I think it's drawn us further away from focusing at home, focusing, like I said, back on your circle of influence. So focusing on the impact you can make locally within the people around you, the people that you talk to and interact with every day. Because now, you can turn around and interact and yell at somebody or chew out whatever you want to do on the internet, and they could be 100 miles away, they could be across the world, and you forget about that. There's so many people right around you that need your support, need your help,
or while you're busy yelling at someone on the internet and arguing with someone on Facebook, there are a million financial opportunities that you're missing out on. Like this virus is like the biggest opportunity for you to improve your position in life ever. And you will never get an opportunity like this
during all this lockdown, read more. I mean, there's so many. Use the internet. Start Googling stuff. Start DuckDuckGo and stuff.
I actually haven't even used DuckDuckGo, so we could talk about that a little more later. But what I was saying though is that it's easier said than done. Like if I owned like a catering company, if I owned a bar, if I owned a restaurant, like if I owned a gym, it's a lot harder for me to say. Like there are going to be certain haves and haves-nots when it comes to this.
Correct.
So it's like like good luck saying that to a gym owner who can't operate their business and still have to pay bills. They're going to tell you to go fuck yourself, and they have every right to. Yeah. But I'm saying that like the average person who doesn't own like a small business, this is a prime opportunity to improve your position in life.
I agree.
Especially when you're getting all the stimulus money. You could have been buying Bitcoin with that stimulus money. You know what I mean? Like there's so many emerging companies right now that have the potential to blow to skyrocket, especially with all this push to green energy, and the genetic. There's so much push towards like genetic modifications. Like
correct.
Like there's so many new technologies that are going to change the world.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of financial opportunities to invest in a lot of things that people are not even paying attention to because we're all arguing with each other on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some people that are definitely going to benefit from the stimulus, especially like the people working in this industry, like the restaurant industry, or the people that were like the gym instructor. They may not own the infrastructure themselves, but I think that's the other caveat to all that. As much as it's going to be hard work either way.
But dude, I'm not talking about the gym owners. I'm talking about like the everyday person who's just collecting unemployment. Like just the everyday guy that's just able to collect unemployment from this pandemic has a giant opportunity to just invest that money into a lot of these emerging companies.
Correct. But I mean, the only caveat that I keep coming back to though is it's expensive. Even just in Austin, it's expensive to live here. I'm from somewhere else. I think we have a 120%. Somebody was telling me increase in cost of living here. And the problem that I have is, yes, we have people that are collecting unemployment, but at the same time, some of those people may have needed that stimulus money as much as it was.
Some.
To pay for rent.
Oh,
so
some, but not all. But there's some did, but there's a lot more.
You think
that had
that's what I'm curious.
Like there's a lot more that spent their money buying shoes, buying clothes, going to the bar, doing things. And granted, going to the bar is great because you're stimulating the economy and all that stuff, right? And I support that, but a lot of people were spending their money on a lot of stupid stuff.
Well, I mean, back to the last stimulus that I can remember a while ago, I think during one of the recession, I think, was the fact that they went and turned around and they bought flat screens. Where does all those flat screens come from? Who benefits the most from all those flat screens?
The company that makes the flat screens.
China. And it's all manufactured in China.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing that people, I hope everybody realizes that when you're spending money with your stimulus check, no matter what you're doing, buying electronics and buying stuff that, that's going to go promote a foreign country isn't going to, is not benefiting America. It's not benefiting your local businesses. It's not even really truly benefiting yourself.
But I think people are becoming a lot more aware of that. And I also think that when it comes to Facebook, what's weird, and it's weird about Facebook because they censored a lot of anti-lockdown protests, but Facebook makes so much money off of small businesses because small businesses do all their advertising on Facebook.
Ad revenue's huge.
Right. So it's like once things this could be the small businesses that get past this is going to be a golden age for there could be a potential golden age for small businesses within the next few years, provided we don't have future viruses that continue happening and happening and happening and
yes,
happening
correct.
and happening, right? But if this just becomes a one-off thing, you could see a real golden age for small businesses because a lot of people are going to go out in droves to support local businesses because of what happened.
I hope so. I really hope so. I have concern. No, I still have concerns because look at the profits of Amazon. Amazon's a perfect example. And you shoot even probably Walmart. Look at the amount of money that they have turned over during this pandemic. I don't know if there's I'll even admit I don't even know if I've been spending enough money in local businesses as much as I should. And I mean I ask that even to anybody to question your spending habit. How much are you actually truly going to infuse your money into your local community?
Well, I go to my local, like all the local restaurants and stuff whenever I can. So
well, no, exactly, and that, I think I'm going to one tonight. But
where are you going? Which one are you going?
I'm gonna try out the Texas Land and Steak or Steak and what is it? Texas
Roadhouse or something?
No, not Roadhouse.
Land and Cattle.
Land and Cattle. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah, I was gonna try that out. It had 4 stars on Google, so we'll see.
All right, we'll see
how it
happens.
happens. But I got a friend in town actually from Vegas.
Nice.
He's working on the company on Tesla because Tesla's up and coming now here. So yeah, which is obviously exciting and scary. I think exciting for people if you have houses already bought, but the fact that Oracle and Tesla is moving here, which is super awesome for people in tech. But at the same time, man, I mean, housing prices are going to skyrocket, things are going to skyrocket, just in general. Cost in general is going up.
Just buy a house in San Marcos or something like that. Just go look. I think that these lockdowns also showed that maybe it's not the best idea to live in a big city, and it might just be better to live like 30 miles away.
Yeah,
and that's okay too, man. You just go somewhere else. Like it's not the end of the world, At the end of the day, like the ideal situation is to live in San Marcos or live in Dripping Springs or live somewhere else and just go work in Austin a couple times a week. Like that's the ideal.
Yeah, I mean, well, especially now that companies are now understanding that, hey, it's okay if I only come into the office 3 days a week.
Because now everybody's working from home.
Yeah, and a lot of companies that have been successful in working from home are continuing to thrive because they were able to be agile enough with tech.
And a lot of their balance sheets, a lot of the company balance sheets are going to get a lot better because they're going to have to they won't be spending as much money on like office supplies and buildings and all types of stuff.
Right,
like
that's
that.
what I'm kind of curious. What's going to happen to all the the buildings that they use now that as they move out, and let's say they have companies that are now transitioning to work from home. I'm curious what. Well,
I think it's gonna hurt the landlords a lot. The people who the landlords of the buildings are probably gonna take a big hit economically. But you could also start using that to build affordable housing projects. So you could all of a sudden start seeing like downtown could be like downtown Austin is like super robust, and it's just like. It's a very like high-end type of crowd that lives there, and within the next few years, you could see like a bunch of housing projects. Like the whole scope of like downtown Austin could change dramatically because like a lot of those buildings might get bought out by the city, and they could be turned into low-income housing and like all types of a whole like the whole
diversify
landscape.
the neighborhoods.
Yeah, but the whole landscape of downtown Austin could change dramatically because of that. Or if you own property in downtown Austin, your property value might wind up going down because of that.
Yeah. That is another potential as well. Yeah.
Like if I live in downtown Austin, I'd honestly want to sell instead of buy. I'd be selling. I would be getting the fuck out of downtown Austin if I lived in downtown Austin.
Really. I mean, because it is kind of waging your bets on when to sell because that. I mean, I haven't checked the.
This
real
is like
estate
already
costs
at a
right
top.
now,
Like this is at a top. People are moving. Yeah, it might go up a little more, and it might go up a lot more in a few years. But at the same time, it's like you don't know how the landscape of the city is going to change with the smart technology. If they ever have to do another shutdown, if you have more civil unrest, you're right in the center of everything, and then
watching the amount of people march down Capitol was pretty interesting.
Yeah, and then also it's like. If you own property and a low-income housing project gets built next to where you own the house, nothing against like those types of facilities because you should house people, right? And you should give people opportunities. But from a financial standpoint, like you're still losing money by that house being built.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good potential. I mean, because unfortunately, people are trying to do things that they have to do to survive, and so that's even increase in threat and vandalism and sometimes even potentially violence.
Yeah, and even like me driving a pedicab or something like that. If that's
you may not have less patrons that want.
I may have less patrons that want to go out, and also I may have to watch my back a little bit more because most people are cool, but there's always one or two that might be up to no good, and people carry cash.
Shit, I don't know. I've seen 6th Street enough times. I mean, you probably have to worry about that occasionally on 6th Street in general.
I generally speaking just move from Rainier to West.
Okay.
Like I just
you have your route.
Yeah, I just don't go on. I go on Dirty if I can, but like I don't wait in lines on Dirty, and I'll do my like 2 a.m. power hour stuff at like on Rainy and on West 6th Street, and like because generally speaking that crowd has more money anyway, so I'll just go find the crowd that has more money.
It's a business. You're doing your job to make money. It makes sense.
But I think Austin's still like a long way to go from something like that happening. But you could just you're gaming like the landscape of what the city could look like, and that could just be something that you might wind up seeing. And you might just wind up seeing like a lot of like robust, like booming cities might actually get hurt economically by the fact that these offices are like, these companies aren't going to be using the offices anymore, and the landlords are going to have to do something else, and that could definitely change the landscape of a lot of cities.
Correct. Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting coming forward. I think the other piece going forward is the fact that hopefully this is a drive for more internet, basically better bandwidth for people in rural areas. I really hope that that pushes for that.
Maybe, but at the same time, though, like, if I live in a super rural area, maybe I don't want to like be connected.
Yeah, well, you have that option, but I think that everybody should have at least the opportunity. I feel like that there should be fast internet speeds across the nation because we're lagging behind compared to the rest of the rest of the world.
I think that depends though, man. Like, cause I was at a friend's house in like Smithville,
okay,
and they had no internet, nothing. I was like, this is nice to like be disconnected from the outside world.
I mean, yeah. So you're saying the fact that if there's a choice, they're more likely to have it. Where if they don't have a choice at all, I guess the problem is I see too many places where there's now monopolies, though, in these rural areas where people did want internet, but they only have one internet service provider that actually has the quality enough for them to get it. And so then every single person has to use that particular ISP.
Yeah, that's a problem. Yeah, okay.
And that's the issue I have.
I think ultimately you got to talk to the people in those areas to see if they want that. I think that's ultimately what you have to do is you have to see if the people in the area want it. Because if they don't want it, like, it's not my job to decide what's best for somebody else.
Yeah, but we want to be able to have more and more people working from home if they're not going to be in the city, so that way they have one lower cost of living. So then they're going to need to be able to have a fairly fast internet for them to be able to work from home.
I don't think that like working from home though is a good idea though. Like, I mean, I think it's a good idea in some capacity, but I think that switching to remote work the way that we're doing can also create a lot of problems.
Correct. I think,
and it'll hurt a lot of bars. It'll hurt a lot of restaurants. It'll hurt a lot of like.
Yeah, happy hours,
venues, that provide like a service that allow people to connect to one another. Conventions too, like there are going to be a lot less conventions that occur as a result of people working from home. So like you don't want that to go away, man. Like that's the hospitality, the whole industry of hospitality could really suffer from this as a result of that. So maybe it's, look, you want to save the environment, you want to like fight climate change, you want to like use your cars as little as possible and do all that stuff, right? But you don't want to switch completely. You don't want to like the way in which people are switching to working remotely could have a disastrous effect on a lot of people.
Correct. I think. Well, okay. So, and the other piece, then, I think Austin especially, we need to have better public transportation. Then.
Well, we did that rail bond, but the rail bond is a 25% tax increase in a pandemic, and train ridership has decreased actually substantially over the past 20 years, and it's going to decrease even more if everyone's working from home. Why are you going to spend money on a choo-choo train?
I mean, no, that's a very good point. I mean, especially, and nobody wants to be in closed spaces at this point right now.
Yeah, because there's a virus going on.
Yeah, I mean, but you want to be able to bring more people in and out of your city, though, to be able to help stimulate the businesses that are downtown. And
it's also going to take 10 plus years to even build. So by the time that rail gets built, all the people that are going to benefit from it in Austin are going to be gone. This rail is not for you.
That's true. Yeah, you plan it. It's going to.
This rail is not for you. But anyway, what do you think about the election? Let's talk about the election. Like, do you think, working in cybersecurity, do you think that actual voter fraud took place to the degree that it took place?
Well, to the degree, that's the question. I mean, I think that's really the big issue. I do think that there was a potential for voter fraud to happen. I think that there could have been definitely some voter fraud happening. Maybe not on a digital scale, but definitely, perfect example, I was talking to you earlier in Michigan, the fact that they were counting votes and they were jamming and people didn't know how to clear the jam votes and stuff. Could that skew numbers? Yes, to a degree to have, one side help another. I don't know. There's numerous articles even coming out that the fact that, yes, there was that the AG at least admitted, yes, there was fraud, but there hasn't been enough substantial evidence for them to say that it is swinging one side. Now, the fact that there's also these small organizations that run these voting systems is super interesting. I really feel uncomfortable with an organization that the government isn't more involved in for our voting system. Dominion is a perfect example. You have this small business, it's funded. I don't remember how many employees, but maybe 200 to 400. I think they're not very many, but you're relying on this small private business to handle your elections with very little government oversight. increases opportunity for something to happen.
Yeah, and they've been using Dominion and Smartmatic in countries like the Philippines and Venezuela and in nations that have a history of really bad election security.
Yeah.
And they're using the same voting systems. And you also had college professors who went on went on television and went on C-SPAN and talked about how easy it is to hack an election.
Yeah, the biggest thing I was reading about is the fact that you could pick out basically you could vote, and they would print a piece of paper at the end to verify your votes. Well, a lot of those people were not, they were watching them, weren't verifying their vote. So during that time period of you punching them in and that printout, that there was a potential for stuff to change. It could have easily changed because not a lot of people were taking the time to look at that validation printout.
And also, there were so many millions of people voted by mail that how do you know that those signatures were able to be verified? Like, you don't know. Like, there is, like, credibility behind what Trump is saying.
Correct. But I think that also stabbed in the back. I think the fact that he told many people not to do mail-in votes, I think potentially hurt him as well in his election.
Yeah, but you also heard stories of people dumping ballots like on Republican routes and throwing ballots into the water and doing there were stories that popped up like that.
Yes.
And you also had people in the post office that hated Trump so much, and people who worked in the elections offices that hated Trump so much that they were willing to overlook and do certain things to derail Trump from winning. Like, you definitely could have seen that. Like, that's not unrealistic.
Correct. And I think that's what is frustrating about everything else. I'm guessing it's the fear that people don't want to even give an inkling of that is why the mainstream media censors that and tries to shut that down, because it is. Yes, there was definitely voter fraud. I'm not going to say I don't know at what scale.
At what scale?
But there was definitely voter fraud.
Yeah, and there was the stuff with the Sharpies in Arizona. Did you hear about that? Where people were given Sharpies to pencil certain things in, and then it didn't count, right? So it's like
the other one, suitcases of
the suitcase of ballots, or the fact that at 4 a.m, all of a sudden Biden got that 100,000 more votes at 4 a.m, and I know they do bundles of votes and whatnot, but are you allowed to do that at 4 a.m. when no one's there? That's stuff
ridiculous.
Like that is kind of a little bit weird, but who knows? Maybe there were people that were there while that was happening.
Well, and the other problem is with the vulnerability of the election is not everybody's at that golden standard of audit. There is a few states here in the United States that do have what people consider like a golden standard for how to handle elections, but many of them have not.
Which states?
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay.
I'd have to look it up. But the other thing that's super interesting though is the fact that their funding has been pulled for it multiple times. Like there's been people. And the other interesting thing is the fact that it's actually been the Republican side, at least that's what they claim. They claim that the Republican side is part of the reason why there's not been more of a golden standard across the elections.
Yeah, and a lot of the Republicans basically said that they were going to count the mail-in votes last too, which I heard that too in Pennsylvania and some of these areas. But then they were also saying we're going to count mail-in votes for 3 or 4 days after the deadline, which is kind of
that's sketchy.
It's sketchy.
Well, and on top of the fact that there was numerous
because then all of a sudden it's Trump's winning. It's but we have 3 days to count. Interesting. All right.
Well, and there's also been several accounts of people just trying to intimidate each other depending on what their political party was. I've heard plenty of talks where they're like, yeah, if they had a GOP sticker, they were shoo them away. And
what do you mean shooing them away?
They were in Michigan. There's a gal that was like, hey, I'm not picking one side or the other. And she was flat out saying that they were literally targeting GOP white men and shooing them away from seeing things, from doing things. Oh, you were too close. You weren't wearing your mask wasn't adjusted.
I was hearing that too. I had a friend who's a poll watcher and stuff. I was hearing a lot of that stuff.
And I'm like, that's ridiculous. You don't see that in the mainstream. I'm not yet again, the very beginning, I'm not saying that there was enough voter fraud to sway the election. But what I'm saying is the fact that there was not fair representation, that there was some voter fraud, that there was some people doing some shady shit at election polls, that should have been at least known. That is going back to even the pandemic. It's the fact that we keep hiding these little pockets of truth because we don't like them, because they're not, even if they're not the majority, they still should be shown, because the people that do find out about them are going to be like, okay, what's going on here? You hide this,
and then it creates more extremism because they're like, oh look, they're hiding the truth, and then now their truth is the truth.
Correct, and then it can blow up further. Even if it was a small amount of fraud, it's going to continue to blow up because the fact that you weren't transparent about it.
Exactly. So just be transparent. There's something else I wanted to talk about too when it came to this voter fraud stuff too, and just to play devil's advocate also. a record number of people did vote in this election.
Yeah.
And then that's another thing. Like, so we did the case for Trump, but let's do the case for Biden.
Yeah.
All right. And so the case for Biden is a record number of people voted,
Correct.
whether it was by mail or early voting, because we had lines out the ass all over the country for early voting.
Correct. Yeah.
And generally speaking, the more people vote, the more likely you're going to have a Democrat.
Well, I mean, yeah, because
Yeah.
I mean, there's more Democrats in the populated areas.
Yes.
So it's a numbers game.
Yes. And also, in 2016, we had one of the lowest voting totals ever. And Trump benefited a lot from the fact that we had super low voting totals.
Correct. And this is the other funny part is I will have to agree that there was fraud back then too. Well, maybe not in the same way, but definitely influences. It's kind of.
Well, I think there was more fraud in the primary with Hillary and Bernie than there was with Trump and Hillary.
Well, I think the one thing that's interesting, and I think this is kind of what they did back to play with Biden, is I feel like because of what happened in 2016 with the amount of pro-Trump media and the things that were going out on social media, that I think that they now stepped up their game to really counteract that. Like, they saw how much benefits there was to advertising heavily on social media, that I think that definitely helped Biden. I don't know if it helped him, but Biden, but helped get his name and his message out a lot more.
Well, Biden didn't have a message. I think what it did was when people saw the BLM stuff, people got maybe scared of posting pro-Trump stuff because they were afraid of getting attacked.
Yeah.
So I think they impeded upon people showing support for Trump based on the civil unrest that was happening.
Well, I mean, but on top of it, though, Biden, you have a commercial with Biden, and he's wearing these aviators and leather jacket, and he's looking all cool, cool like an Air Force pilot.
I don't think anybody was buying that shit, though.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I hope not, but I mean, he that's going to appeal to somebody.
Well, they also
though.
had the Settle for Biden ad campaigns, and I knew a lot of people that were on the progressive left, like the Bernie Bros and stuff, who in 2019 said, hey, if Biden gets the nomination, or if Bernie, there were a lot of Bernie or bust people that I know and I'm friends with, right? And all of a sudden in 2020, they were no longer Bernie or bust. They bit their lip and they voted for Biden.
Yep.
So a lot of these Bernie or bust guys actually voted for Biden, and when you factor that in, that can sway an election. And then when a record number of black people vote, Trump got a much higher percentage of black voters than people thought,
right.
But the difference in numbers, especially when it comes to a big city, could really influence how an election is.
He put his foot in his mouth and multiple times in his
right,
speeches,
but I'm just
though.
right. But what I'm saying though is, that this is just a case for how Trump could have lost legitimately.
Correct.
Yeah.
Exactly, and that's what I mean. It's just the fact that some of the stuff. I mean, perfect example is, yes, there's been times where he's basically said no, he doesn't support white supremacists, but then there's times where he didn't clarify himself in enough of a speech that hurt him. Even if he doesn't support that, even if he's completely, not for white supremacists.
Because I don't think he's for that shit.
No,
at all.
I don't think he is either.
But he doesn't. But you got to denounce that shit a lot better.
Yeah, and that. I mean, shoot, that needs to be a social media campaign right there. Because I mean, that may have affected his vote, because I know there was a lot of people before, in 20, that were black voters that probably did vote for him. But the fact that he continued to denounce and even the fact that he didn't handle Black Lives Matter well, that was the other piece. Just similar to the pandemic, if he would have just came out and showed support, showed the love and compassion and the empathy across the nation, I think that would have really helped him.
No, he said when the looting starts, the shooting starts. I'm like, why are you saying that? After everything that's happening, you cannot say that shit on Twitter. You cannot say that is only going to make people mad, especially if you're low information and you're not as conscious of what's going on around you in the news, and you just see that and all your friends within your own echo chamber keep blaring that shit out. It is only going to create hatred for you, and the hatred for Trump outweighed people's interest in Biden.
Yeah, well, correct. I think that's the thing, because I think a lot of people did not like Biden, did not want to vote for Biden, but because of the shit that Trump kept doing and the things that he said, I think hurt him, even if they did agree with many of the things and the good things Trump did.
He did, because he did a lot of good things too. If you own a portfolio, if you had stocks, if you had investments, this is great. And I like that. And that's one of the things too, is that there are a lot of pissed off black people at this event, rightfully so, right? But imagine if a bunch of them were buying stocks and had portfolios and started investing in 2015, 2016. Half of those guys might be wearing MAGA hats.
I mean, yeah, there's a potential. Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, yeah, because at the same time,
because you see a benefit, and all of a sudden your quality of life is better, and you don't feel oppressed like you're in a struggle. Now you feel like you're comfortable, just me or you or somebody else. So like there is that factor to consider.
Correct. A lot of people were mad at the inequality, and if there would have been a lot less inequality.
There'd be a lot less inequality, exactly. Yeah, if people knew how to like invest and benefit from Trump's presidency, and a lot of people didn't really know how to do that. I didn't start like understanding how to do this stuff until like the end, and I was like, damn, I wish I like knew this stuff now, in 2015, you know, because I could have really like.
Yeah,
I could be in a whole new place financially, you know.
Correct. I mean, it's incredible the amount of things that have happened. I mean, perfect example. I mean, shoot, look at. I know I just brought up Tesla earlier, but look at Tesla stock. I mean, the fact that they got in on Tesla stock, oh my goodness, like they're killing it right now. I mean, honestly, like, and I mean, the fact that this dude is continuing, you know, Elon Musk is continuing to kind of back up his words. You know, I think that's kind of back to the taking actions, which is kind of the, you know, a lot of our points in this thing is taking action of things. It's just the fact that Elon Musk is taking these actions. It's showing in his stock. People benefited. They took action. They bought into it, you know, early, and now going up. Where Trump has said a lot of words, and I don't know if he's been able to, or actually, I would say he said not enough words.
Well, but a lot of what he says also is good too. Like being strong on trade with China.
Yes.
Being tough on China.
Yeah.
Being tough on China is good. Border security is also really important.
Correct.
Without doing inhumane, cruel stuff like separating kids from their families, or deporting people who are naturalized citizens, or doing stuff, you know, where you're, you know, a kid's, you know, moved here when they're 3 years old, like deporting DACA kids,
yes.
You know, like, that stuff is wrong, right? Like, but if you're like actually working towards helping, like preaching a message of border security, that's really important as long as you're not inhumane about it. And unfortunately, they went a little too far with the border security when it came to that. And I think it was a good move to put us out of the WHO and to like get less involved with like the UN and like these globalist organizations. Like I support it. I thought that was a good idea. But the problem is though, like the way he communicated on Twitter and the fact that like there was very little action that was followed by what he was saying.
Yeah. And sometimes action, lack of action was the problem. Like, you know, you can't say these. It would have been one thing if he would have been saying all those bad things, but then also turn around and still had that empathy. Like he could have played both sides of the coin kind of in his stuff. If he would have then turned around and like, hey, you know, came out and said, yeah, I do feel for you. I understand this problem.
And then he like tried to like call Biden like a communist and a socialist and all that stuff. And it's just that the people on the actual progressive left knew that he was full of shit. That probably got Biden more votes from people on the actual progressive left. Whereas what they should have been doing is talked about how Biden was just going to sell the country out to like big tech and global interests and Wall Street and all that stuff. You know?
And China.
Or use like certain ghost accounts to post that on progressive messages to get progressives to not vote for. You know what I mean? Like you could have done, like he just was not smart with how he ran this campaign.
Now, yeah, but you can't turn around and put that all on him. I mean, is that going to be back
his
to
team?
Campaign man?
Dude, his team was not smart. Like they imploded in 2020 because it looked like he was going to win in a landslide. Just last year, I was like, oh, he's definitely getting reelected.
I mean, well, and that's the other thing. Did they not, you know, like, I mean, they didn't take his phone away enough. Like, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I always wonder, like, you know, I would hope that if I had a staff around me, that, you know, if I'm doing something stupid, they'd slap me up beside the head. Like, I mean, do you think he was that stubborn?
Good luck. Yeah, I think he was. I think that it's really difficult. I mean, this guy went through people left and right.
That's true.
I feel like this is not an easy person. I'm sure that if I met Donald Trump, he'd probably be a really cool guy to talk to, and he would share a lot of things with you. And he's very good at being like a master persuader, and he's like really good at like making people feel warm and welcome. Like he's got charisma out the ass, you know. But yeah, that guy does not like being told no, and you could tell.
Yeah.
He does not like being told no, and you can just see that, right?
Well, correct, and he needed, and I think any president needs to be okay. Yeah,
he's just too alpha of a person to like be able to listen to other people. Is what it is.
I don't know about that. I think at the same time that you have to be willing to be okay with being wrong. That doesn't mean that you're like wrong as a person, but the fact that your ideas or your thoughts or your actions may be wrong, being okay with that actually, in my opinion, makes you a stronger
but
person.
Our Democratic leaders are not doing that either.
I would agree. Yeah.
So there's that, but I think the thing is too with Trump and like the national security stuff, and we talked about this earlier. And I really don't think he's like a fascist or a dictator or any of that stuff.
No.
Like I don't think that. But I think he's just kind of inept. And I think that a lot. I think that like the ineptitude might be a big national security threat to the country, more so than that.
Correct, especially early on. I mean, he kind of got, I would not slapped around's the right word, but like he kind of slipped up, it seemed like, a few times when saying secrets he shouldn't have said, like basically things that he was told that were kind of inconfident, and then he kind of shared those things, or said those things at the wrong time. And I felt like later as time went on, he did that less and less. Like he kind of learned his lesson.
He's also talking about during the stimulus. He's talking about the stimulus, and like I feel like he just goes on Twitter. I feel like this is what I think Donald Trump does, right? And I could be wrong, but I feel like Donald Trump will spend like hours listening to Newsmax, OAN, Fox News, all that stuff, right? And going on Twitter, seeing what people want, and then just tweeting a bunch of shit while not really doing much of anything.
There's that potential. I mean, and yet again, it's the fact that like if you get sucked in and you're not real, like if you're only focusing on one stream of media and that's all you're following, of course all your ideas are going to be one-sided.
Yeah. Anyway, how long have you been talking for, Charlie?
1 hour and 6 minutes.
All right. I think we pretty much talked about whatever we were.
I feel like we covered the topics.
We literally covered everything, yeah. Kai, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
How can people get a hold of you?
Hit me up on the Instagram, or they can find me on LinkedIn at kai.stransky. Feel free to message me on there as well.
Cool. You don't have Twitter, right?
Do not have a Twitter. I've had a Twitter a long time ago, but I stay away. I honestly, I really.
Oh yeah, dude. I've stayed the fuck away from Twitter, and I've been really cautious about going on social media as a result of all this stuff.
Notification fatigue's a thing. You know what I mean? And like Twitter's
I turn all that shit off.
Yeah.
I turn all
everybody
that shit
should.
off. Yeah. Anyway, Kai, thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate your time.
All right.